Hi all, Rick here. I recently did a video exploring the history and design of some of the emblems we see in Star Trek, and I thought I'd look at a couple more. Starting with the biggest foe the Federation has faced. The Dominion logo is one that eventually strikes fear throughout the Gamma Quadrant. Many theories were created surrounding its imagery. It's a monolith, an ancient letter from a founder language. But its in-universe origin was in fact entirely different. It had no meaning whatsoever. Amid the shapeshifters' great link, the sharing of ideas and thought superseded the need for a written language and even spoken communication most of the time. The linked existence was the easiest and most natural form of communion to them. Because of this, too, the founders had very little need in identifying marks. However, as they set to work building their empire, the founders recognised its necessity. The Dominion formed around the founders' paranoia of fear of solid life forms. After spending generations being hunted for their shape-shifting prowess by other species, it's understandable that they would seek to build something around themselves to protect their species. But the lessons they learned were how to wield the fear that they were subjected to. A lesson in treat someone like a monster long enough, and they become the monster. The emblem they created was chosen nearly at random. The Vorta, too, elevated now to be the right hand of the shapeshifters, have very poor eyesight and no artistic sense. They have been engineered that way, and so the Dominion leadership simply generated a simple but easily recognisable image based on no existing language. Nothing to give it context, history, or meaning, and chose this to be the heraldry of their great power. The fact that it had none of these usual historical qualifiers or evolution behind it brought a small amount of delight to the founders. After all, witnessing the solids attribute fear, subservience, and deferential acts to a symbol that literally meant nothing was a reinforcement of the founders' belief in the inferiority of solids. Of course, over the thousands of years the Dominion existed, the emblem came to have meaning, and in that way it's no longer correct to say that it has no history or story behind its inception. A good example of a sigil that's meaning entirely is down to what it represented after the fact. The Tholian Assembly's emblem is a seldom seen one. Most of its appearances existed in apocryphal materials, and it was not used in the shows until Star Trek Prodigy introduced it to canon. The hexagonal shape is representative of the crystalline structure of the Tholians themselves, and mirrors their ship design. The design of their vessels, too, is a pretty cool one when it comes to the interior, as the Tholians perceive spatial orientation in a bit of a different fashion than most species. They've got no trouble following planes of gravity plating along a wall and then up a ceiling, and workstations are positioned all around rooms, designed to be accessed as such. While confusing to most non-Tholians, there is constant lore indicating that their very relationship and interpretation of spatial geometry, and in fact space-time itself, is even more interwoven. As an aside, this leads to their fascination with alternate universes and such, as they seem very invested in the integrity of the universe and highly territorial. This is reflected in their design, as the symmetrical logo also having lettering along each edge of the triangle. And while we view it in one direction, it could be that there is no true right way up to view it. The Bajoran symbol was created by Nathan Crowley and Doug Drexler based on some set design patterning that was then adopted into widespread use as the logo for Bajor. However, in universe, the Bajoran emblem is one that depicts the celestial temple at its base, the swirling mass resembling the previously undiscovered mouth of the wormhole. While its appearance was unknown to Bajor for ages, somehow the imagery of the wormhole made its way into their faith, likely through the orbs themselves carrying some trace of their path into the atmosphere of Bajor. That being said, the oval shape remains unexplained, save for the fact that the ancient tablets of Bajoran scripture were recorded in etched stone of the same shape, so it could simply be a pre-existing design that was then altered by the addition of the predominant Bajoran faith. The symbol for the Bajoran militia also resembles the emblem somewhat, but instead of the oval, it's a circle, likely representing Bajor itself, while the central pillar is extended into more of a sword-like appearance. This would make sense, as the militia was tasked with the defence of its homeworld, but it's likely not a blade, as Bajor prized peace over force for most of its history. As a mirror, we see the cult of the Par race using the same parts of the symbol but in different proportions, with the Celestial Temple now being the larger and acting as the backdrop and the rest of the imagery angled down, an inversion of the prophetic faith. And finally, moving on to an eerie one now, the sigil of the Borg is a strange one. In many ways, it's argued that the Borg should not need a symbol of identification, as they literally don't care. Identity is irrelevant under the Collective, so why should it matter how they present themselves? Yet the Borg do have a symbol, the clawed hand. Its design is pretty self-evident. Most of the species they assimilated are humanoid and have hands, so creating the image of one grasping out is an obvious analogy for their assimilation of others. The hand itself is almost blade-like and mechanical in appearance, again showing that it has been converted. Which is funny really, because the Borg often leave a hand exposed and mostly unaltered for utility when they convert a drone. The fact that the Borg seem not to need a logo implies that the emblem may be one fabricated around them by others that the Borg then adopted through assimilation. When it became apparent that other people had attributed a design to represent them, the Borg might simply now encode this as part of their infamous warnings about assimilation and resistance and blah blah blah. True or not, encoding the imagery into the subspace communications might simply be another way to introduce themselves. After all, why do they refer to themselves as the Borg? To a species that might not hear things in the same way or place a greater understanding on visuals or something, the appearance of this symbol could do more to state intent. The initial part, we are the Borg, represented in this sigil. That's all speculation, however, and personally I don't think the Borg ever needed a logo for them. What do you think on the lore of these emblems? Makes sense, or does something stick out as wrong? Until the next video, I've been Rick, and I'll see you later for another lore vid. Thanks again, and goodbye.